want to make sure that everyone recognizes the effort that the organizers have put together. I was only asked a few days ago because I knew they were scrambling together to make things happen. There's so much that goes into making such a huge percentage of such a small town get to the same place at the same time for the same reason. So let's. Nope, they can't hear it. That's more into the mic.
Take care of it.
It was on?
We heard ya.
We couldn't hear you. It was on. It was on.
Yeah. All right, so I was saying, let's one more time thank the organizers of this event because it's really hard to put together. So when I was asked to put together a few thoughts, it was sort of last minute for me, so I wrote them down. First thing I wanted to share with you is some wisdom from an elder of mine. My grandfather used to get so tired in his old age that he didn't have enough energy to care about or respond to everything he heard going on around him.
Yeah.
Let me know if this sounds familiar to you. He'd sit there with his eyes closed while the rest of the family talked politics, and the rest of us would assume that he'd fallen asleep. Only it turned out he wasn't asleep at all. He would filter out anything he didn't care about and only respond to comments of interest to him. So we called it energy saver mode. We called it energy saver mode because he was saving his own energy for what really mattered.
Yeah.
We don't know what that's like.
Watch out.
One evening my grandmother said, "Oh, those Republicans, they're all controlled by big corporations." And someone replied, "Well, who do you think controls the Democrats these days?" And after 2 hours, my grandfather, who we all thought was asleep this whole time, with both eyes still closed, comes out of energy saver mode without moving anything but one arm and one hand, wagging one finger high in the air, and he said, "The same old bastards, that's who." My grandmother turned to me and she said, "See? Asking the right questions is as important as getting the right answers." When we gather like this, like we do today, ultimately, we do it to ask and answer some of the most important and urgent questions so that we can have and be and spread the truth. Yeah. So when people ask who, you can say it's CEOs of giant corporations, you can say it's their shareholders, you can say it's a bought and paid for government, you can say it's the county commissioners falling prey to even the threat of a lawsuit. So like this, you can say it's any number of people, or you could just go into energy saver mode and say it's the same old bastards. But also, when it comes to those in power in a democracy, it really comes down to us. When people ask me as the Director of National Intervention why we work in the addiction model, I answer with the most simple truth I can. There may be no better way to understand how it is that our own species, our own brothers and sisters, can so violently betray our well-being, let alone our chances for survival. Corporations are not people, but too many of those who do their bidding.
Hey, it's an American way. That's what we do.
Are real human beings.
We betray our people.
Wanted to let him finish about the American way in our free speech here. Corporations are not people, but too many of those people who do their bidding are real human beings, and they become so clearly addicted to using and abusing our power and wealth that they can't stop themselves from being a threat to themselves and others. regardless of the imperatives of their disease and control of their actions, regardless of their holy trinity of maximized profits, of the myth of jobs to survive on our own stolen commons, and wealth and commonwealth, or the holiest of holies, to get the maximized gross domestic product out of every single one of us. We have very little choice but to make sure that they get the help that they need, or that we draw very strong boundaries in our toxic, abusive, codependent relationship to an addict, burning down our only home, poisoning our only food and water in the midst of a gross domestic violence. They can't check themselves out of power and into rehab, or if we cannot define and enforce those strong boundaries, their disease of addiction, their greed, will surely destroy any chances we have for survival. So this is about our fighting chance for the human spirit on this earth. So far, Monsanto has no shortage of agents securing our permanent relationship with the corporate agenda in our own society. These are the Monsanto appointments to government positions under Barack Obama alone. At the USDA, as the director of the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, Roger Beachy, former director of the Monsanto Danforth Center. As deputy commissioner of the FDA, the new food safety issues czar, the infamous Michael Taylor, former vice president for public policy for Monsanto. Taylor had been instrumental in getting approval for Monsanto's genetically engineered bovine growth hormone. As commissioner of the USDA, Iowa Governor Tom Vilsack had set up a national group called the Governor's Biotechnology Partnership, and he'd been given a Governor of the Year award by the biotechnology industry organizations, whose members, of course, include Monsanto. As the new agriculture trade representative who would push GMOs for export, Islam Siddiqui, a former Monsanto lobbyist. As the new counsel for the USDA, Ramona Romero, who had been corporate counsel for another biotech giant. As the new head of the USAID, Rajiv Shah, who had preciously worked in key positions for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, a major funder of the GMO agriculture research. We should also remember that Obama's Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, once worked for the Rose Law Firm, the lawyers for Monsanto. And Obama nominated Elena Kagan, to many of our surprise, the U.S. Supreme Court judicial nominee, now Justice, was federal solicitor and previously argued for Monsanto in the Monsanto versus Geertsen seed case before the Supreme Court. She was added to Monsanto's man on the bench, Clarence Thomas, who was previously a corporate lawyer for the company when its products wreaked havoc on the people and habitat of Vietnam in the form of Agent Orange. And what seeds have the Obama administration appointees sown for their corporate masters? Right here in Boulder County, GMO sugar beets, alfalfa, BT soybean, GMO sweet corn, GMO corn for ethanol, GMO stacked corn, GMO soybean, GMO BT cotton, GMO cotton from bear, Atrin, an anti-clotting agent from the milk of transgenic goats, a GMO papaya strain, and perhaps on the horizon, genetically engineered salmon and apples. And of course, the Supreme Court, Monsanto's own, voted to make sure that they could own DNA, the patents to life itself. How much more can anyone have? Is $13 billion a year enough? Is producing Agent Orange killing or maiming 400,000 people, creating 500,000 birth defects in children alone, 1 million more disabled, is lacing every womb on the planet with dioxin enough? Is owning the planet on the patent on life itself enough? Is playing God enough?
Amen!
How about destroying
Amen!
creation?
Amen!
Is that enough? When corporations are people, the answer is no, that is not enough. When they meet every one of the 7 criteria for diagnosing psychopaths, the answer is no, nothing is enough. When those who serve the corporation are addicted to power and wealth, when power is more addictive in the brain than cocaine, the answer is no. It will never, ever be enough.
Talk about the Monsanto Protection Act.
1 second. Donna needs her union break. Once I spoke in Boulder and I had a shirt that said something about a track team and somebody said, "Oh, I get it, you run at the mouth." And I said, "Yeah, long distance. Bear with me." So, when people ask you what, you can tell them it's greed. When they ask you where, you can tell them we've let greed go so far that it's everywhere. It's running those who run our planet and our once sovereign governments, corporations as people, wearing these avatars as psychopaths, have deployed over 13,000 registered lobbyists to push the substance of corporate wealth and power into every vein of our democratic body. 13,000. The next biggest group of lobbyists is labor, who compared to the boss's army of 13,000 has just about 400. That is to say then, that the gravity of our democracy by comparison is that of a small moon. A small moon going by an enormous galaxy of political funding with a black hole at the center where, as we are all sucked into oblivion, we can still hear the addiction system's mantra: corporations are people and their money is speech. Monsanto spent $6 million in lobbying last year. A confidently cool $2.8 million less than it did 4 years earlier. It is probably no coincidence that the price tag for government officials today is far less for Monsanto, as so many more of the government officials today are Monsanto. Nor does it seem coincidental that 2 of the Obama's biggest supporters, Bill Gates and George Soros, purchased 900,000 and 500,000 shares of Monsanto in 2010. Or that so many of those in Congress who received Monsanto election contributions own so much stock in the company. Nor does it seem coincidental that what they all have in common is the addiction and the greed. So the what is greed, and where is here and everywhere, and that much we know. And as the millennia-old Chinese proverb goes, to know and not to do is not to know.